But anyway, I'm excited to get started. I'm going to be going over above and beyond tips for surviving code immersion, which I know a lot of you guys are in kind of full stack, full immersion programs, and that can be quite a bit, but hopefully you guys are all having fun with the classes. So I'm going to be talking about kind of 4 different things: time management, tackling new subjects, building a community, and then what happens post boot camp. These 4 things really generalize and kind of encompass everything that you might struggle with or face within a boot camp. Okay, so starting off with time management, this is a huge one. And if you guys know me, you know that time management is very difficult even for me. Like, it's not something that I've mastered, but I do know the importance of. And so some like tips and tricks that I've learned along the way and that I know have helped me and have helped some of my students before are 3. I'm going to touch on 3 different things. There's like a billion things that you could do for time management. I'm just going to talk over 3. The first one being time blocking, non-negotiables, and then setting realistic expectations for you. So obviously one good thing that does is the fact that you have classes and it's a scheduled time. You don't have to like try to fit into your schedule because you know that class is going to be the same time every day. Same with office hours. Like, there's a schedule that's already set for you. So already that's, or should be, a non-negotiable time for you to set apart from the rest of your day to really sit down and focus on class assignments, in labs, whatever it is. But you know that time is non-negotiable. Unlike some other places you might have to, or if you're like, I've dealt with people who are self-taught and they have to kind of cram learning to code into their day, and that's just not ideal. So you guys already have that kind of going for you. Within that though, I think there's still ways to manage your time a bit better, even though you already have a schedule set out for you. Obviously there's time for instruction, there's time for lab, and then there's more open-ended times like Q&As, tutoring, office hours. But outside of that, obviously learning to code, like, you a lot of times will learn brand new subjects, will go over things so quickly in class that it still requires most students to take some time after class to really review it, learn it, practice it, and actually like apply it to your code. Again, there's a lot of different kinds of classes that are listening into this, but finding some time to practice what you're learning and reviewing, I think, is really important. And one way to do that, which has really helped for me, is time blocking. And what that is apart from setting, 4 hours a day in class, maybe 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, or setting a certain block of time within your day or within your weeks to practice coding, and then getting even more specific with that. So let's say you set some time apart from your schedule and you say, okay, I just want to review. How are you going to review? Are you going to spend that time watching tutorials? Are you going to spend that time going over the notes again? Are you going to spend that time trying to build out your own application or going over some code reviews on HackerRank? So there's obviously, like, even with reviewing, there's different ways of specifying your time within that extra time that you're going to give yourself. So that's kind of the idea of time blocking, is rather than kind of being all over the place, do like one random code practice and then going over the notes. Like, you can set a whole hour where you're only focusing on coding problems. And then you can spend a whole nother hour focused on reviewing your notes. So that way you block some time and you are able to get more into a flow of things within the time that you're blocking out for yourself. Another really important thing is non-negotiables. I kind of already talked about this with the fact that this class offers a non-negotiable time for class, for instruction, for lab. However, outside of that, coding is not like the easiest thing to learn, right? We all know this. It's not, it does take some time, and it can be very difficult. So telling everybody around you, whether it's your friends, your family, like whatever it is, and having them know that you're going to have some times that are blocked out to review or to go over your notes is super crucial, because you may have set out only the time for, class, but then you want to actually spend some time reviewing or applying for jobs or whatever it may be, working on the homeworks. And you should make those as much of a priority as class time, right? So those should be your non-negotiables. No matter what happens throughout the day, you know that you're going to have at least a couple hours extra per week that you are not going to take away from learning what you're going over in the class. And that's really what comes down to, like, making the most out of these boot camps and getting the most out of attending the classes and going through the boot camp. The last one is something that I think is super important, which is creating realistic expectations for yourself. And this is something, like I said, if you're just now getting started, that's obviously the best way to create a plan for yourself from the beginning. Create a plan for yourself from the beginning, or even if you're halfway through finishing up, create a plan for yourself and be realistic. Like if you say, I'm going to study an extra 3 hours every day after class, every single day, that's already kind of unrealistic, right? Things come up, you have other commitments, you might get sick, like whatever it may happen. So setting manageable, realistic expectations within the time that you're giving yourself to learn can be super helpful. Alongside of that, I think it's also important to note that being understanding of what you're expected to learn out of a boot camp and what your timeline looks with the boot camp, right? So, and I say this of all boot camps, I attended a different one, but I think whether you're self-taught boot camp, computer science degree, like whatever your route is, I think that it's important to know that finding a job, learning something brand new, doing an entire career switch or learning a brand new career for the first time, and then actually going through and applying to jobs, all of that takes a ton of time and a lot of commitment. And I think being realistic with, yes, these boot camps and these courses and like doing the work is going to help you achieve and getting a job at the end, right? Because that's, I feel like most people's end goal is to find a job as a developer or something in the industry. But being realistic with yourself, not expecting to get a job one day after after graduating. So being realistic both with your time on like the day-to-day or the week-to-week when studying and practicing coding and all things coding, but also being realistic with yourself and your goals and your expectations. And that way it's a lot less frustrating if you start off with realistic expectations rather than, trying to do everything at once and then getting frustrated because you're not reaching all of those goals immediately. That's it for time management, at least for now. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is tackling new subject. I've seen this again as a student, but also as an instructor a whole bunch. And it's a question that I get a lot of times, especially with boot camps. It's called a boot camp for a reason, right? You're going through a lot of brand new subjects. You're going through a lot of brand new ideas and concepts and terminologies hitting you consistently throughout the boot camp. So it's like one after the other. You finally get comfortable with one thing and then bam, you're hit with JavaScript or functions or the backend. Like there's so many new things coming at you all the time that I think it's important to take a step back and try to figure out what's the best way that you learn, and what's the best way that you intake information but also go back and review it and prepare for new subjects coming at you all the time. And as far as like where you are in your progress, obviously if you're at the beginning, you can kind of take this into this mentality and this knowledge as you start your boot camp and set realistic expectations for tackling new subjects and finding a way that works best for you from the beginning. If you're halfway there and you still find yourself getting frustrated, you can hopefully still implement some of the things that I'll talk about. And then even after graduation, like software development doesn't end at your boot camp. The second you get a job, the second you get a job out in the real world, you're going to be faced with new softwares, new ways that they organize within the company. You might do agile, scrum, like there's always going to be new learning subjects. So hopefully no matter where you are in the process, you can find some of these things helpful for you. Okay, so the idea is to not get overwhelmed with new subjects. And something that I tell all of my students, so if you've been my student, I've told you before, don't get scared to look at outside resources. Your Coding Bootcamp does a great job at curriculum, and hopefully you like the instructors. They're doing a good job, and I think all the instructors do their best to teach what they can, but everybody learns differently. Everybody has a different way of taking in information, and I think it's okay to go to outside resources, whether that's YouTube tutorials, blogs, articles, other free resources. Like I think it's okay. Documentation is a huge one. I think a lot of people pass up documentation because it's really dry reading. It's just a bunch of text and examples, but the documentation is made like, I'm not going to list them out, but there's a ton of really good documentation for specific languages, for specific libraries that you can read up on. And how this ties into learning a new subject is something that I say often is, if you're about to learn something new, whether it's JavaScript or the idea of backend, the idea of object-oriented programming, whatever it is, you can watch a YouTube video or listen to a podcast or read an article about the general big picture idea of what it is you're about to learn. Luckily for you guys, the curriculum is set out to where you know what you're going to learn next. And so you can kind of peek ahead and say, okay, well, if we're going to be learning about object-oriented programming or APIs or whatever it is, you can listen to a podcast or read an article just about the general idea, and maybe in that you'll learn some terminology, words that you might face when you do see the subject for the first time in class. And that way, when you are finally exposed to that subject, it's not like brand new. You might still have no clue how to do it or how it ties into your code, but you'll at least be familiar with some of the terminology and how it applies to the other things that you're learning. So kind of creating that like big picture mental map before even diving into the details of it. Another thing is to be kind to yourself. I know a ton of students get extremely frustrated, and everybody hits that wall where you're learning, and then you hit the wall and you're like, I don't know if I can keep learning. I don't know if I can keep going. Maybe I should drop. And to that I say, nobody was born knowing how to write a function. Nobody was born understanding object-oriented programming and being able to create a React app from scratch. That's something that every single person, even the experts, have had to learn at some point from scratch. So be kind to yourself, understand that everybody else around you is going through something else or something similar to what you are, and know that other students, like even though some students maybe really understand HTML and you feel lost at CSS, maybe they feel lost at CS. So don't try not to compare yourself to others, but also in that same like thought process, understand that everybody has struggled at some point with something, right? So be okay with being lost. I heard this recently. Somebody told me, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, especially with these new subjects. Don't be too hard to yourself. It just takes a matter of time, practice. If you don't understand it the first time, go back, review your notes, watch YouTube tutorials, see if somebody else can explain it, maybe using different words or different analogy, and maybe help stick with you. And then the third thing being, ask questions. You guys are like, one of the lucky things of the fact that you guys are within a coding boot camp right now is that you're surrounded with other people who are going through similar things than you, and you are paired with an instructor, with TAs, with tutors, everybody who is there literally willing to help you get through whatever it is you're struggling with. So no question is too stupid or dumb, or like, oh, maybe somebody's already asked this. Like, it's okay, ask your questions, because you are going through the boot camp right now. You're in the learning process. So take advantage of that, of being in an environment where it's okay and it's safe to ask questions and to repeat something 1,000 times if you need to, or ask for help, extra help via tutoring, or again, going back to those extra resources. Right now is the time to ask those questions, and to also maybe learn to take notes. I totally off topic here, but I actually made a video about note taking when learning to code, because it's a little bit different than just taking notes on pen and paper, because a lot of what we do is within a text editor, right? Whether you're using Atom, Sublime, or Visual Studio Code, we're learning two things. We're learning the technical, how to actually code, but also the bigger idea concepts. And that might be like notebook, pen and paper, notes, and then also like actually coding it. So it's a little bit different taking notes for something like this, where you have both the technical side and like the bigger picture concept sides. So yeah, definitely tackling new subjects. You're not alone in this. And it's a common frustration with boot camps, because you guys are facing brand new subjects almost on a weekly basis. So that's okay. The third thing I wanted to talk about is building a community. Again, you guys are lucky because you are automatically placed within a community of people who are doing the same thing that you are. No matter where you are in life, you guys are all kind of in a pause moment where you're trying to learn something brand new for the first time. And so with this, I want you guys to really, really take advantage of the community that you are automatically surrounded yourself with. I know some of my classes are really good about communicating. Yeah, so take advantage of whomever's in your class, and even don't be scared to break away and go look into the other Slack communities. And then also make sure to expand your network, right? So like automatically you have whoever is going through the class with you, that's an automatic network. Think of this network to create long-lasting relationships, to hopefully you guys like continue to be friends outside of the boot camp, and you can help each other out. Maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the road, one of you guys wants to apply for a new job, and you see somebody else, one of your colleagues from this class, works there now, you can reach out. So make sure that you think of this opportunity as not only like making friends, but also networking and having somebody vouch for the fact that you went through a boot camp, you know your stuff, they know how you work because you've worked together in this like classroom environment. So it's a really good way to expand your network that way. And then also it's a perfect opportunity to help each other out. You automatically have outside of tutoring sessions and the bootcamp class times themselves, you can reach out to this community that you have and have automatic study buddies. You can take turns doing interview preps. You can take turns asking each other questions, doing a Q&A, maybe even like a study focus power hour where you, even on Zoom, which everything's virtual nowadays, but even on Zoom, you guys can say, okay, let's do a power hour, but we'll, Zoom each other while we're both coding on the side. And if we have any questions, we can ping each other or just hold each other accountable. So it's a good way to have a go-to mentor. And remember that coding bootcamp is a lot more than just learning to code. It takes a toll because it's a lot of time. It can be very frustrating at times. It can be very draining. So having somebody that kind of understands what you're going through and where you're coming from can be helpful sometimes just to vent, like just to be like, I'm so tired of this class, or, I'm really sick of my instructor's analogies, whatever it is, like it's a go-to community. So take advantage of that. Don't be shy. And that's one thing I, believe it or not, was super, super shy. And I like would never extend a hand out and be like, hi, I'm Laura, like never. But I've learned from the community of software developers, because I've learned that everybody is so helpful and everyone's been in the same place. So everyone's super like willing to help all the time. So if you are shy, take advantage of the fact that everything is virtual right now. And it's all virtual. So you don't even have to like talk to the person, FaceTime the person. You just send over a chat on Slack and be like, hey, how's it going? Do you want to be my accountability partner? Whatever it is. Yeah. Take advantage of whoever's in your class, and notice just within this own Zoom room, notice that there's many more people outside of just your classroom that you can reach out to. The last kind of topic that I wanted to talk about was dealing with post-graduation and post-bootcamp. Going through bootcamp is very, very draining. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. It's very satisfying in the fact that you start not knowing much at all, and then you end knowing, even if it's a little bit, a little bit about a lot of new things. And it's something that not everybody has the discipline to go through. Not everybody has the motivation or the drive to even apply to a bootcamp or change careers. So that's something like definitely to applaud yourself about, is the fact that you made the switch, or you made the decision to join a bootcamp and to take the time to learn something. Like that's awesome. And you should definitely be proud of yourselves for that. However, I think as frustrating as learning to code can be, as frustrating as understanding objects and arrays and CSS and all of that can be, I think what people don't realize is that post-graduation can be almost twice as frustrating, because this is where things get real. This is when you really want to start applying for jobs. Most of you do. I know not everybody's looking for jobs outside of a boot camp, and that's fine. But I think this is where it's twice as frustrating, because now you're out in the real world as a developer and you're trying to get your foot in the door. And just like with any other job, any other topic, any other degree, no matter what your skill set is, trying to get your foot in the door in a brand new industry is going to be tough no matter what. So it's okay to be feeling frustrated. It's okay to not get a job within the first week of graduating. I think going back to that, setting realistic expectations, I think it's really helpful to understand that getting a job as a junior developer, no matter what your skill set is, no matter how good your portfolio looks, it just takes time. And it's a little bit different than most other job applications, in the fact that not only do we go through a regular application like most other people, making sure you're a good culture fit, making sure you can communicate with people, all of those things, but you also go through it's almost like a whole second world of an interview where you have to go through the technical process. And even the technical process is twofold, because you have the technical can you actually code? And then the technical, can you code and then talk about your code? So that's a whole nother thing that most people don't even realize that us developers have to go through in an interview process. And because of that, it does take twice as much time to interview for any job. I think understanding that, I think, is a big eye opener for a lot of people, because it's a different monster applying to be a developer. Hopefully this isn't discouraging. It's just being realistic with what it's like to apply as a developer. That being said, there's definitely ways to increase your chances of getting your foot in the door. And I think the most important is, now that you've gone through the bootcamp, you have the skills that you need to keep practicing and keep learning. And I think there's a major drop off that happens with a lot of bootcamp grads, where throughout the entire bootcamp, they have this schedule set for them, this time, again, this non-negotiable time set apart to spend time coding, to spend time practicing, to working on projects that they're told to work on. And then there's this like in between time from graduating to applying to jobs, where now it's up to you to set that time apart and to make sure you are sitting down and still practicing your code, going over some algorithm problems, whether it's JavaScript or Java, whatever it is, creating your portfolio pieces, creating things to put on your portfolio. So that's obviously like still a lot of work, but now it's like you go through the bootcamp, you gather all of these skills that you have. And then once you gather that, you can actually apply it and see what you can build with the skills that you've learned. And I think it's a good thing, because the bootcamp provides you with that curriculum, and that provides you with that plan and the path and the time to work on these things. It's just being aware of the time that you spent in the bootcamp. You want to dedicate almost as much time still to continue coding, to continue learning as you're applying for jobs. And then on top of that, you still need to actually apply to jobs, which takes a lot more time. And so applying to jobs, sending in the application, writing out your resume, making sure your LinkedIn is right. Like I said, building out portfolio, creating projects to put on your portfolio, all of that takes time as well. So you want to make sure, going back to the time management, setting realistic expectations with how long will it take you to get your resume, LinkedIn, everything ready to begin applying. Once you begin applying, how much time are you going to spend sending out applications? Once you send out applications, you start getting interviews. How much time are you going to spend preparing for those interviews, especially the technical part? So all of that takes time. This is a static little chart that I found. It means nothing other than it's going upward. And I think it's pretty true that your chances of getting a job goes hand in hand with the amount of work that you put in and the amount of time that you put in. So here, just to list a couple of things that you could work on as you build out your resume, as you after graduating the bootcamp, is work on projects. And going back to having a community. You have people post bootcamp now that you can reach out to and say, hey, let's team up, maybe a team of 2, 3, 4 people, and try to build out an app together. You can collaborate that way, or you can work together and spend a couple hours a day working on this app. And then you can all add that same project to all of y'all's portfolios. So it's like one project going on 3 different portfolios. And that's okay. That's I think a lot of companies would like to see that, not only the initiative to continue coding, but also the initiative of working on a team and collaborating and pair programming with each other to build something out. Another thing that I've talked about in classes is having an active GitHub. I'm trying to get better at this myself, but within your bootcamp, even like as you're going through the classes, make sure that you're uploading to GitHub as much as you can, because unfortunately, one of the things that a lot of recruiters or hiring managers will look at when they're hiring for developers is your GitHub portfolio, GitHub profile. And that GitHub profile has a little calendar with green boxes showcasing how often or how many times a month, how many times a week are you actually interacting with GitHub. And that's just a clear indicator of how much you're coding. And so one little trick is like after every class within your bootcamp, after every single class, make sure that whatever notes you take, even if it's just notes, even if it's nothing functional, upload it to your GitHub, because that's showing progress. That's showing like, hey, I learned this, functions today, arrays tomorrow, objects the next day. You have now kind of a calendar of things that you've learned, and you can go back. And even in like 2 and 3 years, you want to say, I wonder how, what I started with. You can go back and see your growth. I think that's pretty important as well. Another thing, like I mentioned, is networking. If you're applying to jobs, if there's companies out there that you want to look for, it's okay to reach out on LinkedIn to developers who already work at that company, to hiring managers, to recruiters, to anybody that might be connected to somebody who knows somebody. That's what LinkedIn is for. That's why LinkedIn has been created. And it's obviously be kind, be nice, but the whole reason LinkedIn is a thing is to connect. So take advantage of networking. Again, if you're shy, like take advantage of the fact that everything is virtual now. So you can connect to literally the entire world and it's considered okay. Like it's not random if you connect to somebody in Japan or in Canada or anywhere. You have that ability through technology, which I think is really neat. And then, as far as networking goes as well, like if you are applying to a job and there's a position that you really want, don't just, kind of be like, hey, I want a job, give it to me. Start a conversation, say, hey, what's something that I can do that would make me a better fit for this position when I graduate my boot camp. And you can start as soon as now in networking. And then whenever you start applying to jobs, you can be like, hey, look, I'm not ready to apply yet, but when I am ready to apply, I can build up the skills that I know that this company or this position might need. And coding practice, of course, like I said, technical interviews are a huge part of applying to jobs. And part of that is things like HackerRank, Edabit, Code Wars. Like there's a ton out there, a ton of resources that help you go through algorithm type problems that you might be asked. You could Google like top 100 JavaScript interview questions or whatever language you're applying for, whatever position you're applying for. GitHub, I know, has a lot of them. So seek out this coding practice. And if going back to dedicating some time to practicing every day and not just, graduating and then ending all of your coding forever until you get a job, that's not going to help. Maybe implement, instead of going to class, I'm going to sit down around the same times and instead work on coding practices. And then, of course, like I said, actually applying to jobs. So the actual applications, unfortunately, take a lot of time. Sometimes they ask questions that aren't so fun to answer, like why do you want to work at X company? If, tell us 3 skills about yourself, or those questions that you want to make sure you answer properly. It takes time. Something that I've done in the past and I've told other students to do is set up some kind of template to where you go and track common questions that are being asked on applications and keep a track of those. And that way, when you apply to your 30th, 50th, 200th job, you don't have to think about writing an answer every single time. You can kind of go through your template, see if somebody's asked a similar question before, and just kind of like copy your answer over for that. Of course, make sure if you are working through projects or if you are working through different coding examples, if you've picked up a new language, a new skill, to update that and make sure that you are sending out your applications with the most updated version of what you know as a coding bootcamp grad. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Again, if you want to stay in touch with me, I am more than happy to help. I know I tell my students all the time to reach out to me. LinkedIn, you can connect with me there. You can email me at website, YouTube, podcast, Instagram, Twitter. I try to answer to everybody. I do answer to everybody. It's not like I'm getting millions of requests, but I'm always helpful, like willing to help you out if you have any questions, whether coding related or outside of coding scope. And then something exciting is coming out soon for me. So if you want to check that out, you can head over to my website and check that out there. But for now, if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.